This episode is brought to you by Pepsi Wild Cherry. Pepsi Wild Cherry is bursting with delicious cherry flavor and a sweet, crisp taste that gives you more to go wild for. Getting wild may look different these days, but whether it's opting for a solo Friday binge watch or a big night out, everyone can indulge in their wild side with Pepsi Wild Cherry. Also available in Zero Sugar. So grab a Pepsi Wild Cherry and get wild.
Welcome back, Ram fans. This is Rams Up, your favorite LA Rams podcast. We are proud members of the Fans First Sports Network. That's fansfirstsports.com. You can also follow us on YouTube. Our channel is at LA Rams Up. I'm your host, Mark. You'll hear from my co-host, Tom, on occasion as well. Hey, we're not Rams insiders. We're just longtime fans who love talking about our Los Angeles Rams. Let's get to it. Welcome back, everybody. Episode 365 of Rams Up. We continue our tour through Rams position groups and early pass, trying to gauge what direction the Rams need to go with each of these position groups in free agency and the draft, how each group looks right now in February. This episode, the interior offensive line. We'll get to that in a second here. Lance Zierlein of NFL.com finally shared his first mock draft. Lance is one of my favorites. Really respect the work he does and the work he puts into rating all of these NFL prospects. Man, what a task that must be. I'm sure he's got a bunch of guys supporting him and some pretty powerful computers, but nonetheless, good stuff, and I'm glad it's available to all of us. So in Lance's first mock draft, he didn't lay out any assumptions as far as what the Rams might do in free agency. He just dove right into it, and he had the Rams selecting Nate Wiggins, who is actually Lance's highest rated cornerback. Lance had the Jags picking Quinyon Mitchell, the guy that really stepped up at Senior Bowl practices. And then a few picks after the Rams, the Eagles picked Kool-Aid McKinstry. Now, Wiggins out of Clemson is rated higher than both of them by Lance, but Mitchell goes first, Wiggins second, and then McKinstry. And the only reason I'd like the Rams to draft McKinstry is, well, what a cool name, Kool-Aid McKinstry, but Wiggins is the real deal, and I would be very happy with that pick. Unfortunately, Lance's draft has Jackson Powers Johnson, that offensive lineman I love, ending up with the Arizona Cardinals, so that would be a bummer. And he has the Giants selecting Talisi Fuaga, the offensive lineman out of Oregon State, the guy that I had mocked to the Rams in my first draft. So if Lance is right, me grabbing Fuaga with a 19th pick is not very realistic. Right after I saw this, I dove right into a one-round mock draft for the Rams. Wiggins was gone, McKinstry was gone, but Quinyon Mitchell was available, so following Lance's suggested path, the Rams would end up with Mitchell, which I'd be okay with as well. I'd rather have Wiggins, though. Hey, Senior Bowl practices are important. Gives an opportunity for guys like Mitchell to elevate their draft status, but don't overreact. Nate Wiggins is still the best cornerback in this draft. Episode 365, I get to talk about a guy who wore number 65, and I couldn't wait for this one. One of the greatest Rams ever, one of the greatest NFL offensive linemen ever, and with the perfect name for an offensive lineman, Tom Mack. You know, I did my top 50 Rams all-time countdown last summer. Tom Mack came in at 5th, and Gil Brandt, the longtime NFL executive, rated Mack as the 4th greatest guard ever. Hey, you could go on and on about Tom Mack. Just look at his picture. I got one of them up in my Rams man cave. Pretty intimidating. Played for the Rams from 1966 to 1978. Voted to 11 Pro Bowls. First team All-Pro in 1969. Can't believe it wasn't more than that. started in 162 of 184 NFL games, and yes, he is in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. The Los Angeles Rams, with Tom Mack on the roster, had a winning percentage of .720, won their division 8 times, and reached the NFC Championship game 4 times. Tom Mack, one of the greatest ever, and number 65 for our Los Angeles Rams. We're continuing our first pass through each Rams position group. We're going to try to talk about the interior offensive line, and this is another tricky one, and it's a difficult one to talk about without also talking about the tackle position, especially left tackle, as the Rams have a few guys that can play on the interior and left tackle, potentially right tackle, and of course we got a couple guys that are free agents, Coleman Shelton and Kevin Dotson, and we got 2 guys that might be a little bit overpaid, Joseph Noteboom and Brian Allen, but with those free agents still hanging there, what are we going to do with them? It's all guesswork at this point, but let's give it our best guess. But let's take a look back at interior offensive linemen drafted by the Rams over recent years. We'll start with 2011. And actually, over this period, there were 5 years where the Rams did not draft an interior offensive lineman. That includes 2011, 2013, 2016 and 17, and 2021. In 2012, they picked Rokevius Watkins in the 5th round, and in 2014, they selected Demetrius Rainey, a center, and Cody Wickman, a guard, both in the 7th round. So between 2011 and 2017, 3 interior offensive linemen, none of who amounted to much of anything. And then in 2018, they drafted Brian Allen, the center, as well as Joseph Noteboom and Jamal Demby. Now, the thing about Noteboom and Demby, they're both listed as tackles in that draft. Never saw Demby as a tackle. I saw him as a guard who really struggled at the NFL level. Noteboom's kind of a swing guy, but I think of him as a tackle first. In 2019, Bobby Evans, another guard tackle, ended up being more of a guard. In 2020, Tremaine Ankrum. 2021, one of those years they did not draft an interior offensive lineman. And then 2022, they drafted Logan Bress. They also drafted A.J. Akuri, a tackle, by the way, in 2022. And then in 2023, Steve Avila and Warren McClendon, listed as a tackle, another swing guy, can play guard and tackle. Not a good track record for the Rams on the interior. I mean, how many of these guys were just flat-out successes? So far, just Avila. Noteboom and Allen have certainly had their moments. Certainly wouldn't call them bust. They're pretty good players. And Logan Bress, not looking good at this point. So what's our current roster look like on the interior? Well, we got Steve Avila, Brian Allen, Mike McAllister, a little bit of a wild card, a center. The Rams apparently like him. Then there's Logan Bress, Grant Miller, Noteboom, and then Zach Thomas. Keep in mind, Alaric Jackson is a restricted free agent. I'm sure the Rams will retain him. Tremaine Ankrum and Kevin Dotson and Coleman Shelton, unrestricted free agents. Now remember, Shelton became a free agent by playing in more than 55% of the Rams' offensive snaps. So let's talk notable unrestricted free agents. Veteran Kevin Zeitler is out there, really good pass blocker. Robert Hunt made a name for himself in Miami, but they run a zone rushing attack, so only the Rams' offensive gurus know if he would be a good fit for the Rams' offense, and Hunt's probably going to come at a pretty steep price as well. The Seahawks' Damian Lewis, 332 pounds, big dude, he's a mauler. He played well in a Seattle offense that utilizes the zone more than the gap offense the Rams have been leaning towards, but he can play in both. Jonah Jackson, the Lions free agent. He's a guy that could fit what the Rams do pretty well. And then there's Dalton Risner. His strength is pass blocking. Now, all these guys are guards. How about centers? Well, Kyren Williams, another Miami free agent. He's probably the best one out there. And again, just like Robert Hunt, has played in a zone scheme Andre James with the Raiders. Raiders liked him enough to shed Rodney Hudson, a very good center at the time, and has played well for them. And then there's Lloyd Cushenberry of the Broncos. Very good pass blocker, could be sufficient in a downhill running attack. The one guy that could fit what the Rams do and may come at an affordable price, Tyler Biadasz of the Cowboys. Remember, man, he was celebrated coming out of Wisconsin as the next great thing, and he's been pretty good. Has struggled against power rushers, but he's got a lot of experience calling pass protections, which is what Coleman Shelton was so good at as well. And they say his strength is combo blocking, and that is exactly what the Rams have been running more than half the time in their run game. What makes it a little difficult to evaluate him is he's playing alongside some really good offensive linemen in that combo blocking scheme, namely Zach Martin, the all-pro guard. But he's a mid-tier center, very smart, can make the play calls, won't be too expensive, so he could be a slight upgrade over Coleman Shelton in a lot of ways. As far as draft prospects, there's a few guys you gotta love. Troy Fuatanu out of Washington. The Rams would have to grab him with their first-round pick, or in the second round, maybe trade up to get him. Jackson Powers Johnson, man, this guy. You want someone to run this duo power gap running scheme. Jackson Powers Johnson might be the best in this group. Man, he will just pummel people. 6'3", 320. I'd have no problem with the Rams using a second, possibly even a first. Just depends on how they address some of their other needs in free agency. There's Graham Barton out of Duke, Christian Hayes out of UConn, Christian Mahogany out of Boston College, and then back to that guy we've talked about several times here, Cooper Beebe out of Kansas State, 6'3", 322. He's another steamroller. He'd be perfect with this new running scheme the Rams are running. They would be my top three. Getting greedy here, Troy Fuatanu, Powers Johnson, and Cooper Beebe. But there's some other guys that the Rams could grab later. Zach Zinter, the guy out of Michigan that got hurt, couldn't play in the college championship game, and several others. So what is our conclusion here? What do the Rams need to do to make sure this interior offensive line is good to go? Well, the biggest factor is, what do they do with Kevin Dotson? Do they spend the money? Dotson earned a big paycheck. Which team is going to step up and pay him? Is it going to be the Rams? Not much to talk about after that, really. We got to figure that out. Coleman Shelton is another piece of the puzzle, but the Rams have some flexibility there. They could slide Avila over to center, maybe plug Brian Allen back in there. He is, after all, still under contract. And then there's Mike McAllister. Maybe he's up to the task. Only insiders know. So let's look at their options should Kevin Dotson and Coleman Shelton walk. Well, your offensive line could set up something like this. Alaric Jackson at left tackle. Avila returns at left guard. Plug Brian Allen in at center. Noteboom the right guard. Havenstein the right tackle. Is that an improvement for over last year? I don't think so, but I don't think it's a big drop-off either. I think Noteboom has a lot more potential at right guard than people realize, but yeah, I'd rather have Dotson back. Another option is to slide Avila to center, and your left side of the offensive line would be Alaric Jackson and Joseph Noteboom. And you know what? You could maybe even swap those two. And then you have Havenstein at right tackle. Who's your right guard? Go out and sign one of these less expensive free agents, or you draft one. So there's a lot to figure out along the offensive line. All comes down to Dotson. Do you spend the money on him? Now, as bad as we want to keep Dotson, keep in mind we could find someone that's almost as good for less money. Plug him in there. I'm telling you, drafting someone like Powers Johnson in the second round, use that money to go get a free agent cornerback perhaps, or a wide receiver. If you're selecting a guard, you just got to make sure you hit on that pick. More Avila-like, less Logan Bruss-like. Hey, we haven't even mentioned Logan Bruss. Maybe the Rams are going to rejuvenate his career. Maybe a year off, getting healthy is what he needed. Maybe he'll come back and compete for a starting job, but don't bet on it. So those first couple weeks of free agency will tell us a lot about the future of the Rams offensive line and what the Rams strategy might be. If you're going to run a mock draft, you got to take the approach I did. Just come out and say it. Kevin Dotson has been retained or Kevin Dotson has not, and then run your mock draft. It's the only way to approach it. Lots of question marks. That's the best I can do right now. We'll talk about the tackle positions, and in doing so, we're going to have to revisit this whole offensive line once again. We'll do that in the next couple of episodes. That's going to do it for this episode. Remember, you can reach us at ramsuppodcast@gmail.com. And don't forget about our YouTube channel. Our handle is at laramsup.com. Till next time, keep the horns up, stay safe, and have fun out there.